Today on Not Your Average CEO Lifeline, we are talking about being a multifaceted entrepreneur and the mindset that it takes. What unique skill, determination, drive this particular avenue requires. We are proudly hosting our special guest, HGTV star, CEO, and founder of Hammer Construction and Consulting, Thadeus Starsiak. He's going to provide us with his incredible and invaluable advice on this topic. Thaddeus, we are so eager to hear your story, your advice, and how our audience can begin to implement some of these key aspects to success. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and your companies? As I know you have a couple.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here. And then as far as my background, I just turned 30 in September. And I've been trying to be super industrious. So I own Hammer Construction. I've owned that for the past 4 years. I own an apparel business called Love Heels that does like positive apparel. And then I have a few rental properties, so real estate. And then I'm currently working on getting a nonprofit side of my Love Heels business running as well. And then, yeah, grew up here on the west side of Indianapolis. Hoosier boy through and through. Love this place. And then also, yeah, I guess trying to build a social media business too. There's a lot a lot of things going on.
So, a lot of times entrepreneurs can be scared, right? And afraid to take on all of that stuff, or maybe even stray from what they know, right? If you were to say, I just know sales and that's all I want to do, right? I'm afraid to branch out. What advice would you give to these entrepreneurs, and what steps should they take when looking to break into having multiple companies and multiple avenues, and just taking that leap of faith and that mindset that they're going to have?
Yeah, so what's worked really well for me is mentally rewiring myself. So a lot of times people are very scared to jump into the unknown because it's naturally a very scary place. But in that scary place, there's also the biggest opportunity for growth. So if you're really trying to grow and you're trying to have multiple businesses, you can't really be scared to make that jump. Or if you are, you got to rewire it to where it's like, okay, the reward is in that area that I'm afraid to go towards. And if you can rewire your mind to like when an obstacle happens or there's something you don't know, you're like hungry to learn that thing. Like, okay, here's something I don't know. Now I can add it to my repertoire. In construction, I'm doing that all the time. There's sometimes things I run into that I don't know how to do yet. And I'm like, okay, awesome. How do we add this to the skill set? How do we add this to a service that we can provide customers and have another revenue stream that way? So, really don't be afraid of it and hop right in. And also just realize on the path to success, you're also going to fail, and that's okay. And that success and how great it is ties a lot to how much you're willing to fail and continue to learn.
Growing up, did you think that you would be here today? Like, did you feel, I know when I was growing up, we would sit in a computer lab and they would say, take these tests so you can pick one, career path that you were going to do. And um, I definitely did not, right? So I knew
Yeah.
that at an early age. I'm an atmospheric scientist. I'm a a climate scientist. I've written textbooks. I'm an author. I did not want to stick with one path. Did you know that, growing, did you get that sense that I want
No.
to?
So growing up, what I wanted to be a vet. I thought I was going to be a vet growing up. So when I was young, loved Animal Planet, loved Steve Irwin, and I thought that was my passion for the longest time. But I did a lot of work with my stepdad and then my also real father. We always did yard work, always did landscaping. My dad has like 30 cars, and though we moved a lot of those just by pushing them around, pushing them onto trailers. And somehow I got something called what I call the ox
Mhm.
gene, where I just really like physical labor. Like when I have a harness
I
put
like
on
that.
and I'm
The
like plow
oxygen.
that field, I'm like, let's do it. So high school time when I was doing all that physical work, I was an athlete as well. I was like, I really enjoy this. So then I kind of started drifting over towards construction. And in my early 20s, still didn't really know what I
Mhm.
wanted to do. I went to college for like 2.5 years, And like my first year, I studied business, Spanish, and theology. And then when I got to the next college, I studied Spanish and business. And then after that, I hopped into a whole new world. I was on a TV show on HGTV called Good Bones. And that's kind of where things started cementing themselves more, where I was getting all this experience in construction, doing 13 to 15 houses, either new builds or total renovations. And we were doing an insane amount of them in a very short period of time. And I was like, okay, I'm really good at this. I possess the physicality and the grit. And in construction, you have to be very gritty. So, no, I did not know that I was going to eventually end up here. I had no idea I was going to start multiple businesses. Really, what it was starting Hammer Construction. I started that. And then I was like, okay, wow, this is going really well. And I realized something about myself where it's like, you're capable of a lot more than you thought you were. And you can take on a lot more than you thought you could. So over the first 2 years of the business, I was like, hey, man, you can actually handle a lot, so let's keep going. So, yeah, didn't know at first. But now it's like, as I've been doing it, it's becoming more evident. It's like, okay, you have the skill set to do this.
So
I
for
love
our
that you use the word grit. I think that's something that is important to a lot of entrepreneurs, as you said, especially in construction. But how have you seen that word pop up, like with your nonprofit, with your clothing company, with the real estate endeavors that you do?
Yeah, so it can get real stressful, right? Like having one business can be stressful enough. And I don't, like I went to school a little bit for business, but I had to really teach myself all of those skills. So building up those skills was tough, and having multiple businesses even tougher. So that grit really comes into play when you're really tired. And for me, that grit looks like when I'm mentally beaten down and I'm like super stressed, or I feel like some amount of imposter syndrome step in that kind of wants to take over my day or take over my week or like get me into a bad place. That's where I get real gritty with myself. And I'm like, hey, man, we're doing great things. You're 30 years old, you're killing it, you're moving forward. So the grit really comes to me not so much in the physicality of construction or owning multiple businesses, but the ability to keep your calm, stay tranquil, and see all the options from a very level playing field. Because when you're stressed or you're super tired or you're just under a large emotional swing, you're not going to make as good of decisions as you would if you remain in that calm level place.
Yeah, I think that that self-awareness that you have is really incredible, and I think that's difficult to have at any age. But it seems like you certainly were able to achieve that a lot earlier than most people. And how do you feel like that has helped you, and how you what advice you would have for others to sort of not get bogged down as you're thinking about trying to maintain that level of self-awareness and stay in a more positive space?
Yeah, so I had a lot of stuff happen in childhood that was very stressful. Had a lot of people who had like passed away. So very young, I was introduced to adversity. And with things not going well in my childhood very much, I was very sad a lot of the times. So I had to build this inner resiliency to myself. So as I got older, I've learned more and more tools to stay in that positive mindset, to stay resilient. So for people who are wanting to be an entrepreneur or starting their own business or already in it can be really hard to maintain that positive attitude. And you're not always going to succeed at doing it, but there's a lot of things that I do to stay in that positive mental space. So one of the things is like we're constantly trying to make a better iteration of ourselves. And I'm always checking in with myself when I'm having that imposter syndrome where it's like, hey, I can't do this, you can't do this. But the thing is, the person you're doubting is an iteration of yourself that is going to get you from point A to that next point B, the next iteration of yourself.
imposter syndrome, I think, is something a lot of CEOs face, especially if we're talking about opening up multiple avenues because you have to jump from one thing to another, right? You have to jump from multiple selves, I guess you can say, right?
Yeah.
Multiple mindsets from, if I'm talking about climate stuff and then now I'm talking to my staff about virtual assistant, it's bouncing back and forth. Um, so having multiple businesses,
Yes.
what do you do to stay organized? Do you have a calendar? Do you have help? Do you have an assistant that keeps you on track? What do you do to make sure that you're not going every which way as typical CEOs do?
Yeah, so to stay organized, like Hammer construction wise, I have a spreadsheet and I have all my jobs and they're either pending or they're accepted. And essentially for any task, whether it's Hammer construction, whether it's Love Heals, whether it's real estate, it's pretty much on this list. And each day I go through that list. And as a CEO, like what I think is the best thing to do is like you're pushing everything as far forward as possible. So if I'm looking at a job and let's say it's like a Victorian house and the next part is siding, I'm calling my siding vendor. When can this stuff get dropped off? And then I'm going to the next thing on the list and it's like, what does this house need? And then when I transfer over to Love Heels, it's like, okay, I need to touch base with my assistant. Have those shirts been made? What kind of information does that person need? So essentially, to stay organized, I try to go through everything that needs an actionable item and execute that and just kind of push that piece a little bit further and further. Construction wise, one of the really tough things about a general contractor is that you have to think about the whole process of an entire house from the start to finish. And there are so many intricate things that happen where if one thing changes, it could change the other six. So having that organization where you're seeing everything on the front end and then you can respond to it is going to help tremendously just continue to push everything forward. So organization wise, like that spreadsheet is everything to me, and that's what I use. And then as soon as somebody tells me like I need to be somewhere or do something, calendar reminder. Oh, the plumber said follow up with him on Wednesday. Okay, I'm going to follow up with him on Wednesday. And then typically on Wednesdays, for me, I'll do my Love Heal stuff. So Monday, Tuesday, Hammer Construction. Wednesday, I'll shoot content for Love Heals. I'll shoot content for my personal Instagram page I'm trying to build. And then Thursday, Friday, I'll go back to Hammer Construction. So, because it's really hard to like split a day up. Like there's been days where I've had to like have hard conversations with contractors, and then I'm stepping into shoot content where it's like positivity and everything. And one of the things I really don't enjoy is like faking a feeling. It's
Hmm.
like, no, if I'm gonna be shooting this content, I need to be happy right now. So really dividing up that time, and especially when you have several venues of business, you need to know which one's your money maker. That one deserves the most time. And then as the other things get bigger, you can share more time, but definitely make sure you take care of the money maker first.
Yeah,
It's
that's
really
really good
helpful.
advice.
I
Yeah.
should listen to it because I
Yeah.
Mondays are our busiest day, and I always put the podcasts on Mondays, and it's really
Yeah.
hard to go from working with your staff and talking about clients to jumping into what topic we have for podcasts. So I should take your
Yeah.
advice and
We are
just
going to
do
take your
one
advice.
day. Yeah. Um,
So we, invited you on because we felt like you are not your average CEO, and it's not just because you have, the multiple businesses or what you've been able to achieve. But I'd love to hear, just in your own words, what you feel that means to you, not being your average CEO, and how you can stand out as a CEO.
Yeah. So I think not being your average CEO, it definitely leads with leadership. And I think the leadership aspect means you are pushing things forward. You're always innovating. And as much as you can get beaten down by that stress and imposter syndrome or self doubt, like you are the person who has to find a way to move forward.
Yeah.
So never really stopping, because like my guys in construction will sometimes get tired and be down, and it's my job to lift them up, to innovate, to find different ways to keep progressing our construction company. So really, I think it is this very brave soul who keeps going into the battle and defeating all the self-doubt, all of the obstacles with a very positive mindset. And you shine that light for everybody else because that's how you create a culture. And if you don't have that culture there, you're not going to make it as far as you like because it takes more than one person.
Yes, it definitely does. And I think, that's something that we live, and in our everyday life here, just with our staff and how we all integrate. Nicole, I think you'd probably agree with that.
Yeah, and it's different for us, right? We're virtual, so to create that culture is really hard, and to uplift people when they're so far away and disconnected in a way, it's challenging for us.
Yeah.
But I think you really nailed it when you said that not your average CEO is leadership and having to build up your team and culture. It's hard to do that, right? It's hard to change your mindset when your team may be thinking one thing, and uh, there's a lot of pressure on CEOs and executives to lead and lead in a positive way. Do you have any last minute advice for our listeners who are starting out and maybe just have a side hustle, or thinking maybe they can't do it? What advice would you give to them being in the place you are now, um,
Yeah.
to motivate them?
Yeah. I would say my advice is just know that you can do it. Like 4 or 5 years ago, I had no idea I'd be in the position that I'm in. Had no idea that I would ever make over $100,000 or more. So it really first takes that belief in yourself. So continue to believe in yourself, and then whatever the obstacle is, just find the way forward. Don't get defeated by it. Push through, because your best life and fulfillment is on the other side of that. So it's really risky to stay put, but you really want to push forward to get to that better side of life that you want for yourself, and you don't want dreams falling by the wayside. So continue to believe in yourself, and things will happen in your life that you did not expect, and you'll learn a lot more about yourself.
That's wonderful.
That's great
You know,
advice.
do you have any last minute questions for Thaddeus?
We would love to hear a little bit more about Love Heals. I know we'll include some information in the show notes, but of all of your many ventures, I think that's a
Yeah.
really interesting one. And I'd love for you just to share that a little bit more with the audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Love Heals was something that existed in my mind for probably like 12 years before it started. So, I was alluding to earlier that my childhood was very rough. I lost my mom. I lost several other people. It was just a very dark time in my life, and I attended this crazy retreat in Colorado with Hindu monks and nuns, and I was very sad at the time. And there wasn't really anything like healing the heartache that I was going through. And in the span of 2 weeks, I met a bunch of individuals who loved me in such a complete way that it ended up healing this very painful part of me. And it gave my life a lot of purpose afterwards, because I said, hey, I'd like to be that kind of love in the world. And as we know, like life's hard, so people loving us always tends to help. So that's where it started. And with Hammer Construction, with the real estate stuff, the easiest way to just get it going was starting that apparel business. So that apparel business has positivity, affirmations, words on the shirts and such, just to be a little reminder, create a little ripple of all the wonderful things in the world, your self growth, how well you're loved, and it's a little way that I'm aiming to heal the world. So that's what Love Heals is about, and it's my passion project right now. But hopefully, here in a few years, after a few of these other businesses get towed in line and just super organized, I'll be able to really focus on that one, because that's really where my heart lies, is letting people know that they're loved.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thaddeus, can you tell our audience where they can find more about you? Obviously, we will put it in the show notes, but we always love our guests to verbalize where we can find more from you.
Yeah, so you can find me on social media at the_demo god. You can find my construction page at hammer_construction. And then you
Mhm.
can find Love Heals at love_apparel with 3 extra L's because everything else was taken. But yeah, that's where you can
Mhm.
find all of it at. So whether it's construction, whether you're looking for some positivity, that's my personal page, or some positivity apparel, that's Love Heals.